SKOL Vikings, let's win this game.
Vikings fans, today is busy with the latest headlines. The salary cap is squeezing Minnesota, and big names are already getting floated as cut targets. That Tuesday presser also left a heavy, we should have handled this better vibe hanging over the quarterback room. And on defense, the outlook has the front office more than a little nervous. But the last one, it hit the fan base right in the heart. We're about to jump in, but real quick. Subscribe to the channel and drop your thoughts in the comments because this space belongs to the whole fan base. Here's the deal. The salary cap is tightening around Minnesota's neck, and when that happens, somebody always ends up in the spotlight. The name making the rounds today is Jonathan Greenard, but pump the brakes. This is not the simple cut him and move on talk. It's more of a warning light than a final verdict. The situation is easy to understand. The team needs to clear around $40 million in cap space before the start of the new league year. That forces the front office to stare at big contracts and ask, is every dollar worth it? Greenard is in that conversation because his cap hit for 2026 is massive, around $22.2 million. If they released him before June 1st, it would free up about $12.3 million. That's where the noise starts. But there's a huge catch. In 2024, he was a nightmare for quarterbacks. He brought pressure nonstop. You do not find an edge rusher with that kind of impact every day. You definitely don't find one making less than the monsters at the top of the position. The top 10 guys are pushing $28 million a year or more, and Greenard is well below that range. So in reality, the Vikings have a player who's expensive against the cap. He could still be a bargain based on what he can deliver. The problem is that 2025 was rough, period. He missed 5 games and landed on injured reserve. And even across 12 games, the production fell off hard. After 12 sacks the year before, he finished with just 3, and that matters. Fans see that number and immediately start thinking, cut him and move on. But football is not just a box score. Injuries wreck rhythm, and Brian Flores' defense demands explosion every snap. There's also the detail about that cut or restructure candidates list. That's more of a roadmap than a decree. It's basically saying, keep an eye on these guys because their contracts don't line up with last season's output. And even the person who puts that list together makes it clear most players do not get cut. That's especially true when the team believes in the player and doesn't have an easy replacement. And let's talk like Purple Faithful. If Greenard looks like 2024 again, he can change games by himself. That was a key piece of the defensive rebuild. So I'm not buying the he's gone panic. I'm buying the pressure. Pressure for him to come back healthy. Pressure to produce. To me, the most realistic path is a restructure conversation or a very straightforward prove-it year. Greenard knows what he has to do. He has to go back to being that 2024 nightmare. If he delivers, then he sits down for an extension with real leverage. And the Vikings benefit because this defense needs guys who can get to the quarterback. And tell me in the comments, would you adjust his deal or let him play out 2026 as is? This is the kind of bleacher-level Vikings read you don't get the same way everywhere. Now hold on, because the next story came straight out of that presser. It left a massive question mark around the most important position in sports. You know when the front office tries to sound polished and ends up revealing more than it meant to. That was the vibe of Tuesday's press conference. They didn't lock anything in, but they sent a loud message. The quarterback room is going to be a competition again. And in the middle of it, we got a rare moment of humility. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah admitted the Vikings messed up in a very specific spot. The question was direct. Were you too confident that Daniel Jones would come back for 2025? Kwesi didn't say yes in those exact letters, but he got close. He explained that Jones being in the building mattered. Relationships mattered. The locker room mattered. But at the end of the day, a free agent is a free agent. The player is going to look at everything. And the general manager dropped the line that stings. We could have executed better. For the fan base in purple and gold, that has 2 meanings. First, they weren't aggressive enough at the moment of truth. If you want the guy, close it. Don't sit back and assume it will work out. Second, and even more uncomfortable, if you misread the quarterback market, you pay for it. And you pay for it on the field. Because Daniel Jones ended up with the Indianapolis Colts. And before he tore his Achilles in early December, he had them at 8-4 and fighting near the top. Then he goes down, the Colts unravel, and they finish 8-9 outside the playoffs. That's how brutal this sport is. One body breaks and the season can break with it. And on Minnesota's side, it leaves that what if hanging in the air. What if he had stayed to push J.J. McCarthy? What if that competition had helped stabilize the offense? Kwesi also leaned into the idea of a competitive environment. He said you can't cling to what you did like it's always right. He said you have to review the process, learn, and adjust. In fan terms, they wanted Jones not just to play. They wanted him to heat up JJ's seat. And that, to me, is the most sensitive point, because if you were 100% comfortable with McCarthy, this conversation wouldn't carry that tension. You'd bring in a system backup and move on. But when the word of the day is competition, it means there's doubt. It's not panic, but it's doubt. And I'll be honest, I respect hearing an executive admit he missed. That's rare in the NFL, but it also makes me cautious. Learning is great. Learning late is expensive. So the real question is, what are they going to do in 2026 to avoid repeating this whole movie? Bring in another veteran. Bet on JJ making the leap? That answer is coming soon, because the next story is the head coach talking about JJ himself, and the tone didn't feel all that comfortable. Some things a press conference can't hide. You hear the tone, you catch the pause, and you understand the message. And on Tuesday, Kevin O'Connell made that crystal clear when the conversation turned to J.J. McCarthy. They were asked every which way if J.J. is the starter in 2026. What we got was the talk of competition, depth, and the best room possible. KOC said he wants the deepest, most talented quarterback group he can have every single year. He also talked about how that impacts the salary cap because the quarterback position touches everything. On the surface, it sounds like standard coach speak. But for anyone who lives and breathes Vikings football, it lands like a warning. Nobody is getting the job on reputation alone. And here's the part that bothered me. He kept stressing that there has to be competition at quarterback. He said it makes the whole room better and helps the offense thrive. Sure, competition can be healthy. But when a team truly believes it has the guy, it doesn't lean on that message this hard. It talks about growth. It talks about the plan. It talks about continuity. This felt more like, we still need to see more. O'Connell did say he was encouraged by how JJ started to play in the second half of 2025. He talked about an emphasis on completions. He talked about finding easier gains, and he talked about explosive plays showing up. That's good, that's progress. But notice what he didn't say. He didn't say he's our future and that's that. He praised him, but carefully. And too much caution at this position turns into noise in the stands. And I know, Derek, give the kid a break. I want to. But the NFL doesn't. The Vikings are going into the offseason looking at affordable veterans. They're looking at young developmental options. They'll even consider a trade if it makes sense. And all of that connects back to the cap. If you bring in a more expensive challenger, you squeeze other positions. If you bring in nobody, you put all the pressure on the kid's shoulders. Defend the North wants balance. And right now, that balance doesn't feel guaranteed. The truth is JJ still has limited NFL mileage. He has only played 10 career games. So it makes sense that the Vikings want a real plan B, and it makes sense to add someone who can push him. But that also puts the offense on a tightrope because you don't want a young quarterback playing scared. You want confidence. You want command. And I keep thinking about the locker room. The offense has to buy into the quarterback, from Jefferson to Addison to the entire group. If the message from the staff is nobody owns the job, it can become good fuel and lock everyone in. But it can also create noise if the team doesn't pick a direction early. Tell me what you think. Is this competition talk just protective messaging, or is it real doubt about McCarthy? And stay with me because the next story hits the heart of the defense. There are people in purple and gold worried about losing the brain of the entire scheme. You know, when you look at a defense and think, this thing has a clear identity. The Vikings have had 3 strong seasons on that side of the ball, and one person has been the face of that shift, Brian Flores. But now the noise is different. People are betting he could be on his way out of the defensive coordinator chair. As of now, he has only interviewed for one head coaching job, and that was with the Baltimore Ravens. Even so, sportsbooks have been listing him near the top for other destinations. One betting line had him as a heavy favorite for the Las Vegas Raiders at around plus 150. He also showed up near the top for the Ravens at around plus 450. That doesn't win games, but it shows you how much the market is watching him. And here's the part that gives you that cold feeling. If a team offers him a head coaching job, everything changes. It's a bigger salary, it's a bigger chair, and it's the chance to run the whole operation. For Minnesota, losing Flores would be like ripping the brain out of the scheme because this defense isn't just about talent. It's about pressure called the right way. It's about disguises that mess with quarterbacks. And it's about in-game adjustments that make an offense look lost. But there's more nuance here. ESPN's Dan Graziano put out predictions for the head coaching hires. And in his projection, the Ravens would hire Kevin Stefanski, not Flores. The Raiders would go with Robert Saleh. So there's a path where Flores doesn't land a head coaching job. But then comes the second fear. If he doesn't become a head coach, he could become the most in-demand defensive coordinator on the planet. When the head coaching carousel stops, coordinator openings pile up, and teams with money and urgency will make serious offers. That means the Vikings would have to fight to keep him, and fight for real. The league also has its history. Flores still has that discrimination lawsuit against the NFL and several teams. Some people believe it influences decisions. I can't prove that, but I hear the talk, and it's hard to ignore. Even with that shadow, he has stayed at the top as a coordinator. And there's already chatter about major teams looking at him for coordinator roles like the Dallas Cowboys. If a bidding war starts, Minnesota feels it because you don't replace a mind like that with just any assistant. And this defensive roster is still being built. So the message is simple for Purple Faithful: enjoy it while he's here, and put pressure on the front office to value him. If he stays, this defense can be the team's anchor. If he leaves, it's a new beginning, and that costs seasons. And brace yourself, because the next story isn't about scheme or cap. It's about heart. And there will be fans in purple and gold swallowing hard. I swear there are certain headlines that hit different. This isn't about scheme or cap math. This is about memory. And today that memory has a name: Adam Thielen. His retirement was announced on Wednesday, 2 days after Pittsburgh was eliminated from the 2026 playoffs. It was a tough 30-6 loss at home to the Houston Texans. And then the announcement went official. Thielen ends his career at 35 years old, and he was the oldest wide receiver in the league. If he came back for 2026, he would have played the whole year at 36. So deep down, we knew this moment was close. Still, it hurts. It hits you right in the chest and lingers, because he is the definition of Minnesota to the bone. He wasn't drafted. He arrived in 2013 as a free agent. He took the hardest road possible, and he became a star. The numbers are wild for someone who started from nothing. 8,497 receiving yards, 704 catches, 64 touchdowns, and 178 games played. That's a whole lot of history. And his story feels like a movie, but it's real. He grew up in Minnesota. He played at Minnesota State in Mankato. He paid out of pocket to attend a regional combine. He met with the Panthers and Vikings. And he chose his hometown team after going undrafted. Seriously, think about that for a second. His real breakout came in 2016, when he went from a minor contributor to a true target. And in 2017 and 2018, he stacked back-to-back seasons of more than 1,200 yards. The Vikings had a duo that made defenses sweat, and he became one of the most respected number 2 receivers in the league, next to Stephon Diggs, without any ego, just crisp routes and reliable hands. His career also had its twists. He was with the Vikings from 2013 through 2022. Then he left when the sides couldn't agree on a pay cut, and he went to Carolina in 2023. He still helped there, appearing in 27 games across 2 seasons. But in 2024, the injuries piled up, and he missed 7 games. Then came the reunion in 2025 when Minnesota sent draft picks to bring Thielen back. But his role had changed. Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison were the top options, and Jalen Naylor was ahead of him in the rotation too. So Thielen became a wide receiver 4. In 11 games, he had 8 catches for 69 yards with 0 touchdowns. He asked for his release after Week 13. The Vikings granted it, and the Steelers claimed him off waivers. In Pittsburgh, he got a little more usage, posting 11 catches on 17 targets for 117 yards across 5 games, still with no touchdowns. And then he decided it was time to stop. To me, it's the kind of ending that mixes pride with a quiet sadness. The peak was massive, the finish was more silent, but the legend doesn't disappear. And now I'm watching how the team honors that farewell here with respect, culture, and real recognition. Because after everything we talked about today, there's a feeling in the air that the Vikings are standing at a crossroads. And this isn't only about 2026. Take a breath for a second. The cap is tight. Jonathan Greenard is hearing the noise. Kwesi is admitting he mishandled the Daniel Jones situation. KOC is talking competition for J.J. McCarthy. And on top of that, the defense could lose Brian Flores. In the middle of all that, Adam Thielen steps away and reminds us why we love this franchise. The fan base in purple and gold has seen everything, and still the hope is stubborn. I'll say it straight. 2026 will decide whether this roster becomes a real contender or stays a forever almost. Now it's on you. Drop a comment, because this space belongs to everyone who lives and breathes Vikings football. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.